Sana'a is reputed to be the first city in the world to be rebuilt after the floods. The people who roam its narrow, dusty streets have lived for centuries in deep-frozen barbarity, which has only occasionally been disturbed by the probing of the outside world. Sana'a looks today much as it must have done in biblical times. Since I was in Sana'a, the deposed Imam Bada, whom the rebels hoped was dead, has reappeared over 100 miles from here at the head of an army of loyal tribesmen in the north of the Yemen, and he's promised to win back his feudal kingdom from the leader of the revolution, Brigadier Salah. Every man who can afford a rifle carries it as a prized possession, and it's the support of these men that Salah needs for his new regime. The old Imam kept the tribes subdued by the classical method of taking hostages against their good behavior. Many of the tribesmen seem to me to have come into Sana'a just to see what was happening. They spend much of the day chewing a mild narcotic called khat, which distends their cheeks like a ping-pong ball. The Yemen is incredibly poor, and its economy is based entirely on agriculture. Everything is done by the most primitive methods. Donkeys, for instance, are still used for threshing. It would be a problem for any government to bring the Yemen into the 18th century, let alone the 20th. Outward signs of the revolution are few, until you look more closely, for instance, at this picturesque camel train. The boxes are ammunition, stamped Imam in English, and they're being carried into an arsenal now controlled by the Republicans. The revolution began at midnight on September the 26th. During the 8 days of his reign, the new Imam Bada had released the tribal hostages, freed political prisoners, and appointed Salah his commander-in-chief. This policy of appeasement proved fatally misguided. Walking through the ruins of his damaged palace, I heard the story of the revolution from the new government's spokesman. In the center of Sana'a, there's a square which dominates much of the city, and at midnight, 6 Russian-built tanks of the Yemeni army moved in from their barracks outside the city wall. 3 stayed in the square and 3 surrounded the palace. The Imam was telephoned and asked to surrender. He refused, and the tanks began shelling the palace. The Imam fought back until dawn, when he left through a small side door, normally used by the women. It doesn't say much for the revolutionaries, as there are only, as far as I could see, 3 ways out of the palace in all. The revolutionaries pursued the Imam for 22 days, until they lost track of him in the north. When he'd gone, the public were allowed into the palace to loot. Hundreds of pounds of radio and photographic equipment appear to have been destroyed. What film had survived was almost all of Mr. Khrushchev, Mao Zedong, and Russian military parades. When the Imam had escaped, the revolutionaries turned their attention to the palaces of other members of the royal family. This is the home of Prince Hassan, the Imam's uncle, who was leading the Yemeni delegation to the United Nations at the time of the revolt. This palace was also shelled and looted. In all, 3 royal princes were reported killed. In Prince Hassan's palace, the revolutionaries also claim to have found a vast hoard of silver thalers, the antique Austrian coins still used in the Yemen. In another palace, the royal women were collected together and kept unharmed until the new government could find a more useful way of life for them. Now, this sort of organized demonstration takes place in Sana'a about 5 times a day. The slogans are against Saudi Arabia and Jordan and in praise of Nasser and Salah. Other propaganda pictures are these of Imam Bada wearing Western dress and dancing with Western women. They're deeply shocking to Muslim Yemenis, who were put in prison by the old Imam if they wore shirts or trousers. The face of the revolution, as seen in these soldiers now guarding the royal palace, is ridiculously young. They insisted on posing with their Czechoslovakian rifles. One of them told me he was only 14 years old. In all, I saw very few signs of the Yemeni regular army in Sana'a itself, and so-called soldiers wore any uniform they could lay their hands on. An officer accompanied the cameraman and myself wherever we went, and did his utmost to prevent us filming anything military. There were, however, plenty of Egyptian troops, several hundred in and around Sana'a. out of the 10,000 now estimated to be in the Yemen. Most of them are presumably up at the northern front. And some of the Egyptians are repairing military equipment. For instance, the 20 or so tanks the old Imam bought from Russia, another shot we were forbidden to take. They're also flying bombing raids in Russian-built planes of the Egyptian Air Force, like this one crashed on the runway. While I was in Sana'a, so was the Egyptian Minister of Defense, Abdul Hakim Ahmad. He was there for talks with Salal. Salal told me later they'd renewed the defense agreement by which Egypt would send support to Yemen if Yemen was attacked by Jordan or Saudi Arabia. When I met Salal, he showed me Saudi Arabian-made mortar bombs and an American automatic rifle captured, he said, during fighting in the Yemen. He called them proof that Yemen is being invaded, and he also believes that Britain is helping the Sharif of Behan, whom he says is fighting him on his eastern border. This is the Saudi crest. Salal himself was kept in and out of jail by the old Imam, but didn't join the revolutionaries until 2 years ago. Why did the revolutionaries decide to act now?
لماذا قرر الثوار أن يقوموا بالثورة في هذه الأيام؟
The truth is that the revolution has been delayed. It was supposed to have taken place 3 years ago, and this revolution is connected with the 3 previous attempts which failed. It succeeded this time because the errors of the past were avoided.
How many Egyptians are there here now in Yemen?
About 1,000, mainly technicians.
How long does Brigadier Salal think they'll stay?
Until the aggression of Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Behan is ended.
Is Brigadier Salal thinking of joining the United Arab Republic?
This question is premature. We've announced that our policy is based on independence and peace. We welcome friendship with any country, whether Arab or not, whether Eastern or Western. We made this revolution because the Yemeni people were suffering misery and poverty to an extent unprecedented in history. We have many problems to deal with, especially in education and development.
Is Brigadier Salal a communist?
I am a Democrat.
What is the biggest problem facing Yemen?
The problem of aggression against the Yemen by Behan.
What about economic problems?
Our economic problems are very great because the previous government left nothing in the country. Even the money from the national exchequer was sent abroad.
Is Brigadier Salal thinking of a greater Yemen? For instance, does he wish to join Yemen up with Aden and the countries of the Aden Protectorate, the South Arabian Federation?
We have work to do in the north, and in the south we leave this question to its own people. We have many economic problems arising from the backwardness and underdevelopment of the country, which are far more important.